Hello and welcome to another episode of Seddon and Laceys Comic Stash. And it is that time for a top five.
Top five.
And as always, with all top fives, there must be rules.
There are rules. I must admit, I'm going to be honest with you, Chris. I didn't listen to the rules. Uh, It was only when we recorded the last episode when you mentioned there was rules that I went, oh shit, there were rules. However, more by luck than judgment, I'm not breaking any of the rules.
So the rules are they are the top five films from the MCU. So anything from Iron Man through till Ant-Man, Wasp.
Quantumania.
Yes.
Um, how do the Spider-Men fit in the rules? Just because, for clarity, because technically Sony, but also a character in the MCU.
So if we're going on MCU canon, only Far From Home or the one with the free Spider-Man
Really?
point, because the others are not technically part of the MCU run.
Are they not?
No,
Why not?
because they were all pre that and until. Or are you talking to Tom Holland?
Yeah, Tom Holland. Yeah, sorry. Yes, Tom Holland. I should have clarified that. I'm talking just Tom Holland Spider-Man. Spider-Man?
Then I will accept them in, even though they're not
Cool.
officially.
Yeah, and that's why I wanted to clarify. Because I think if we're going to have rules, like for anyone watching at home is kind of going, would I put that in my top? Am I allowed under this rule group? But yes, because I kind of figured Tom Holland was because Tom Holland is in multiple of the ones that are
Yes,
canonically
yes,
MCU. Cool.
but you can't have Garfield
Well, you wouldn't, would
clicky
you?
or clicky
But
fingers emo Spider Man.
I say you wouldn't. I'm sure there's lots of people who'd have the first Sam Raimi in a list. But yeah, good. But yet again, I will say spoilers. I haven't broken any rules anyway. But I haven't broken any rules.
But you just wanted clarification on the rules.
Oh God, yeah. You know, if you're gonna have a set of rules, the world needs to know, don't they?
So before we go into our top fives, as is tradition, let us get in our reading corners.
I chose that corner to be my reading corner this week. I'm. Shall I go first? Because I'm just going to blast for a quickie. Because we're doing a top five. I
Yes.
know you didn't half rabbit on, so I figure I'll keep it short. Uh, uh, Very quick. I spoke in the last episode about being rooted deeply into the Jonathan Hickman era of X, and one of the series that come up was a solo series for Juggernaut, and it's just 5 issues, and I would say that it's not required reading for any of the Dawn of X era, but because it is written in that time, there are kind of a couple of cameos, like Juggernaut kind of meets a few of them, and they kind of there's a plot point around Krakoa's for mutants only, and as
Mm.
much as Juggernaut is related to Charles Xavier for years and years and years, worked alongside Black Tom Cassidy, who is on Krakoa. They kind of go, Krakoa's not for you, boyo. And there is a plot point in here that picks up on mutantdom. But I just kind of read it because I went, look, I'm reading all this stuff. Not really bothered by this. Don't think I'll really like it. But it's 5 issues let's crack through it. And the only reason
Yeah.
why I picked it out is it was a it was a genuine surprise for me. It is not brilliant. I want to lay that out right now. It is just good, but I was expecting nothing out of it, and it was a really nice, as I say, really nice surprise. I guess there's no better word from it than that. And um, the story picks up. Juggernaut has been through a previous depowering. His armor's been destroyed. So in theory, you pick up of him just being plain old Kane Marco, but parts of the story, certainly in the first couple of issues, pick up on how he finds his way back to being a juggernaut. There's a whole kind of pantheon of issues out there that talk about how where his powers come from the Crimson Bands of Sitarak, and this kind of leans into that. But it's more a story about he meets a modern day. I'm going to use the term hero loosely because at first she's someone called D-Cell who is a bit more of a kind of a social media, like her whole thing's about getting followers and things like that. And then over the course of the issue, she teams up with Juggernaut because having Juggernaut will get more powers. They set up a Juggernaut Hulk fight so that the public's perception of Juggernaut might change to him being a hero, but or
Yeah.
discover of followers. But all in all, it was a really fun and enjoyable read. Would I say put it up high on your list above anything else? No, but I think if you ever kind of get to it on Marvel Unlimited or however people out there read stuff, give it a go. It's quite good. Fabian Nicieza, I think that's how it's pronounced, writes it. I remember him from the 90s. Was a very sort of prevalent writer in the 90s and generally did well, but I would say that probably not one that you look back and go, oh wow, here's an Alan Moore, here's a Grant Morrison, but
Yeah.
like was decent. And that was one of the other reasons why I read it, because I thought I haven't read anything by him for years. But yeah, tells a really good story. And Ron Garney, who does the art, he did a run many moons ago on Captain America with Mark Waid, and I loved it. It's when I see Captain America, I see Ron Garney's Captain America. That's the one I see in my head.
Yeah.
And he was an art, and the art's really nice in this as well. But yeah, just a really kind of nice, unexpected surprise for a good series.
Nice. So I have two, one of which is going to be quite quick because you've waxed lyrical about it lots
Doesn't sound like me.
recently, and I've just started it. Is the 2021? I think you said it was Daredevil run.
Oh
Um,
yes,
I've done the first 5 issues of that, so I haven't done the full first trade. But fuck me, you're right.
it's
It's
good, isn't
fucking
it?
good.
It's really good, isn't it? I I know when we said about it before, but and this oft happens, doesn't it? Like
Yeah,
you're a couple of pages in and you go, I'm gonna love this, and
yeah,
then you get to the end of issue one and you go, oh, and I still love it, and so on and so forth. But yes, I've spoken about it enough. But yeah, I do love it.
yeah. As I said, I've just done the Punisher one, and
Yeah,
having old school Punisher be a nasty bastard in old school,
yeah.
I like that a lot.
I thought that was a spot on that as well. That rendition of the Punisher is the Punisher. It's what I think of when I think of the Punisher as a
Yeah.
character, and I thought they did it so well.
So yeah, I will be carrying on with that one. But the one I did want to do a little bit more on is from 2009, El Diablo. Um, this was one that I was in the pub because the other half was working, and I'd gone up to meet her for when she finished. And I know I'd said I was going to read Marvel, but for some reason the Marvel app didn't want to work when I was at the pub. The DC one did,
Didn't
and
like the
I
pub.
and I had these already on the iPad anyway because I'd seen them ages ago and was like, that looks interesting. I'll give that a read. I like this. This is fun. It's only a six issue run. So basically, a Mexican gangbanger gets possessed by the spirit of a former Catholic deity who is the right hand of Satan and can go around and judge people and sees all of their crimes and must kill them for their
They must
crimes.
die.
Um, Interesting art style. It does fall off a little bit at the back of this. I think obviously it had been put in for a 6 issue run and maybe the sales weren't great or it was a time constraint or something, but the last sort of 2 issues are a little bit rushed on some of it. So it has moments where the art is beautiful, even in those last ones, but it isn't as consistently good as it is in the earlier ones. Um,
I love the artist on this, by the way, Phil Hester. When I've just got it up on my screen to kind of follow along. remembering quite fondly. A Green Arrow is a particular run that he
Mm.
did that I really really like. But yeah, I'm a big Phil Hester fan, so that attracts me to this as an idea.
But it said it Satan, evil, murdering,
Satan.
the things that I like, and bit of vengeful super murder.
No idea on the writer. I think it's like Jai Nitz. I never heard of him. I'm going to go with. I think
Mm.
it's he's a man. But yeah, never read anything. I think by him at all. So yeah, I got kind of no frame of reference to him because El Diablo's character for since we're doing a movie episode, a character that they latterly use in the Suicide Squad movies, isn't it? Or movie, should I say? I think he's only in the first one.
Yes, very
Yeah.
very shortly in there, um, and badly done in that as well. Said I'd never read any El Diablo before. I don't know where he would normally sit because he doesn't turn up in Batman. I don't know if he's a Superman or a
I don't know. I must admit, not a
Aquaman
character I
or.
know a ton about. So yeah, unfortunately, sorry, I cannot provide any context for you on that one. But
But yeah, I do see. I have seen there's another limited series, but it was from like the early '90s
well, this
that I
one's the
might.
third volume of his stuff, so there are two other volumes before this. But it sounds to me like the way you described it is probably, other than the mythos behind it, probably not linked. Smacks to me a little bit of, and partially because of the cover of the first issue, and I think it's the cover of the trade. Like, kind of, there's some Ghost Rider elements to it, isn't it? Like
Yeah,
lots of kind of fire in that and that skull look, and I wonder whether maybe those other volumes will speak to that, as in, it could be different characters or different humans, let's say, but
yeah,
like the kind of the satany side stays true in all of them.
yeah. I think it's going to be one of those of that. It is very Ghost Rider. Now that you've said Ghost Rider, I'm like, yeah, because he has a horse that he rides, which
Oh, cool! I didn't
also
know that. I
has
hadn't seen a
fire,
horse in it. Yeah.
and yeah, it is definitely one of those. Of, now you mention it, it's like, yeah, I get it. So yeah, it's one of those. It was a fun little read. I will probably get the older ones and work my way backwards.
So like,
And
I'm just quickly looking at like volume one on here, and all very different art style. Looks like it's a very different concept, but I think that probably will be quite an interesting endeavor to kind of go back and go, how did we get from here to there? And the second volume is actually Vertigo. Um, there was a four-issue series early to 2001. Yeah, 2001. Which I'm guessing is probably the least link because it's done in Vertigo. But yeah,
yeah,
probably worth seeing. And again, sometimes that's one of the really interesting things about comics over the years, isn't it? Is uh, what was conceived as a certain idea, let's say early 90s, that people can take that and really kind of iterate it and jump it forward and add a massive amount to that canon and take them to a totally different place that
yeah,
you end up loving even more. So yeah, probably a pat on the back for the comics industry for constantly reinventing certain characters.
yeah. So new characters that I found this year, Century, and now El Diablo. So
El
two very
Diablo.
two very different types of character, but both scratching an itch that I like. But shall we go to the cinema now?
Yeah, let's. Well, I say that I don't really go to cinema much anymore. So,
All right, let's
shall we sit on our couches and watch something through streaming?
let's load up
Yeah,
Disney Plus and go
yeah,
from there.
yeah.
So, do you have any honorable mentions or ones that were so close that they just missed out?
I know we did actually talk about this beforehand. I'm going to go with no, but don't let it stop you because the one that probably would be my honourable mention will get mentioned when I talk about one of the other ones later.
Yeah, so my honorable mention is because we couldn't, due to the rules, and this was discussed, was that it couldn't be counted as both parts of it together. They are two separate films. Endgame misses out on my top five.
I guess a bit of a spoiler
Just.
for what does make it into your top five, then.
Ooh.
Yeah. Endgame. Talk to me. What?
I've.
What?
This is the perfect second half to a great first half of an epic giant comic book. This is one of those that truly does what a good comic does, where it goes over multiple trades. It pays off everything that you have from the first one. I love the callbacks to Avengers 1, the time jumpy stuff, and the epic fight. When you see those epic fights in the comics and you go, you could never do that on a TV show or in a film because it just costs too much, or too much in like
Yeah.
effects and stuff. But to have everyone in a mass brawl, it is one of the best comic book films for bringing the comic page to life.
Well, you sort of said it's a great second half, or probably like the end of that two-parter. Where I think its massive strength is for me is that, and I probably should have counted before I did this, but it's the great 21st part of a story. I
Yeah,
think it is Marvel has its phases, and I think like it was always like this is the end of these phases. So this story ends here, and you see that characters will persist and go on, and clearly they were going to do more with it afterwards. But I think as a cap off point to everything that they were trying to achieve, I think it's I think it's actually incredible and amazing how they managed to sticking the landing is so hard to do, isn't it? There's
yeah,
so many TV shows and franchises and things like that their failure point will be the end, because it's really hard to do a satisfying ending for everyone, or even for lots of people, because by the time you get to this point you've written the story in your head and you've gone, this is what I want, and everyone, lots of people, not everyone necessarily, but lots of people will have a very different idea of what that end should be. But yeah, I think they did it masterfully with Endgame, how they managed to um, put it together in a singular movie that I think ticks so many boxes of things that have been set up over
yeah.
a number of years.
So yeah, so said it had to be mentioned, and if I'd have been able to have both as one, it would have been probably my number two of all. But we had rules, and they are separate films,
Yeah.
so Endgame misses out. But we shall now go into our official top fives. And Mr. Seddon, what is your number five?
So I think this would be considered my most controversial of my five. But I don't think it's very controversial. But I think it probably would be, considering um, all of the other movies that exist. For me, my number five is Doctor Strange in the Multiverse of Madness. I love this movie. It makes it into my number five, and I have read a lot about it, and I've read like lots of people's thoughts and opinions on it and where they come from. It makes my number five because it does what I think the Marvel movies, when they're at their best, it is the mixing of genres. So it's taking the comic book stories that exist and using elements of that, and the characters, and of course ones that have now fleshed out in the cinematic universe. But then when they put in tropes from other genres, and of course with this, it's Sam Raimi directed, and arguably I think for large parts of this is a Sam Raimi horror movie in the Marvel universe. But I will say, for anyone who hasn't seen it, open your real mind real wide for the horror movie element of it. You're not going into this and getting Evil Dead. but I think you are getting a lot of the stylings that made him so distinctive when making movies like that brought into this more fantastical comic book universe.
Yeah, I was gonna say it has nods and tropes from Evil Dead,
Yes, yeah,
but in a way that I can take. Will was what, 11, 10,
yeah,
11 when it came out. I'm happy for him to see these tropes and
yeah.
not have to have years of counseling. Whereas if I give him Evil Dead at
Yeah,
that
yeah,
age, is a completely different matter.
yeah. You might not want, you might not rest so easily that night when you're laying in bed knowing that you might have turned your child into a psychopath. One of the things that really helps for it for me as well is the story. It's called Doctor Strange, but I would argue that this is not a Doctor Strange movie. I would argue that this is a Wonder movie and a Doctor Strange movie. But I would argue to a large part it probably is more impactful and moves forward the story of Wonder more. A character that I really liked from the comic books, a character that I really liked from all of the other phases. Partially, I think I liked her because of the stuff I know that happens in the comics. And I think there was always a chance that they would go interesting directions with her. Then we got WandaVision. If that you said about if uh, if you could have Avengers squished together as a single movie. If you'd have let me have WandaVision as a movie rather than a TV series, that would have been high up in his top five. But without it ever necessarily being a detriment to Doctor Strange. He is there. There are kind of I think very interesting character moments they have with him. The look at some of the arrogance that he always inherently had as a character and what that cost him in life. It cost him
Yeah.
the love of his life, and in this movie he kind of gets to see maybe what could have been if he'd gone a different way with that with the love of his life, and a lot about sacrifice and how sometimes you want to think that your heroes will sacrifice to save everything, but the subsequent costs that might come to those people. How much of yourself do you give up? How close do you turn to the dark side for the purpose of good? And
Mm.
these are the sort of questions that I like, because I like to walk away from a movie afterwards and kind of chew it over. And I think to the most part, as much as I love superhero movies, you don't get that quite so commonly with the mainstream superhero movies. But this had that extra kind of chunk of meat to the bone that I felt that I don't always get elsewhere. But yeah, absolutely fantastic movie for me. And it also introduces a new character into the Marvel universe, and probably one that will, I think, have some significance considering it's the multiverse and she can travel the multiverse. But America Chavez, and I just thought brilliantly played, uh, almost instantaneously compelling for me, and it made me want more America Chavez. It made me want more Wanda. It made me want more Doctor Strange. And I think in these sort of franchise movies, um, I go big tick. You've done your job well if you've made me want to not only watch Doctor Strange 3, if there is one, but I want to see Wanda the movie. I want to see America Chavez the movie.
Yeah.
And I think the effects are very, very good throughout. I think there's a couple of ropey moments on that regard, but that's probably when we get more into the seeing the alternate versions of some very popular characters, some of which hadn't been in the MCU before. And I do think that's one of the bit that it oft gets criticised for, is maybe its treatment of some of those characters.
I,
However, I'm
I
an apologist around that, because
mm,
I think that people went in wanting to have something that was maybe more wide reaching and significant with that, whereas that's just a plot point. That's just kind of a small moment to move the story forward for me. And I didn't go in kind of spoilers. I didn't go in wanting to see Reed Richards from the Fantastic Four, despite the fact I knew I was getting him. I didn't really care because that's not what this story is about. It's not a Fantastic Four movie. It's not about introducing them into it. But it was a nice moment because you kind of go, ooh, but they deal with it very quickly and I think quite effectively.
Yeah, I mean the problem with that scene as a whole was you were never going to please everyone, because you had some people were expecting Deadpool, some people were expecting, like the that rumored 90s Avengers film that we were going to get with like Tom Cruise and Brad Pitt and like all the big 90s stars being the Avengers. Obviously, there was the talk of obviously one of the X-Men or something X-Men being there as well. I don't think that was going to land with everyone, because,
I,
as I said, I think everyone would have wanted something different out of
I,
the
I
multiverseness.
slightly disagree because I think Reed Richards enough was enough to please everyone. I think what didn't please everyone was that that wasn't the movie because I feel like people felt like they were going into this and then you were going to get an hour plus of following these round, and no, you didn't. You got 10 minutes, and I
Yeah,
think that was probably people's bigger problem with it, and arguably, and you get Patrick Stewart as Xavier in it, and I think to a degree some of the criticism is thrown at this, as I say, this one sequence in the movie where I feel like people kind of go, oh no, they were dispatched too good, you didn't do right by my characters. They're not your characters. They were an alternate universe version of them, like that was
yeah.
laid out as part of the story. But yeah, I do acknowledge that that's where people seem to have a bit of a disconnect with it. But for me, I probably wouldn't have had it in there at all. But I think it would have been equally as panned by those people who pan it for having that in, for not having any of those characters in a movie called Multiverse of Madness. But yeah, it was an ancillary part, and I thought, I mean, God, if we didn't have that scene, we wouldn't have that amazing death of Black Bolt that we have in it, which I just think is just so well done and so unexpected. But yeah, it's my number five. I loved it when I saw it at the cinema, and I must admit, going in, I'd seen the trailers. I'd you couldn't on the day, and I saw it the day it came out. You couldn't avoid the spoilers online of whom was in it, but um, I got a much better movie than I thought I was going to, and I got a movie that I loved.
So my number five,
Number five, Johnny
Shang
Five.
Shang-Chi and the Legend of the Ten Rings.
Yes.
I fucking love a kung fu film. I never thought I would get a Marvel kung fu film that has all the budget and the tropes that a Marvel film can have, but giving me the best kung fu film since Crouching Tiger.
Yes.
And it it was just a character that I had no knowledge of. It was a So I was going in going, I have no expectations for this. I don't know what it's going to be, and I came out loving Shang-Chi so much so that I grabbed a couple of bits and read some stuff after coming out and watching it. I want more of Shang-Chi.
Give me more Shang-Chi, you
I want,
bastards.
especially when they're in the temple and all that part of it. And it was great to have a superhero film that wasn't just massive explosion set pieces. It was nice to have more fighting and it be more hand to hand, and it just more grounded.
I would say as well, like parts of this are based in America, aren't they? And you get some great fight scenes, kind of. But I think that the thing I really liked about it is that look at the expansive world. It was that there is a world. And to a degree, there are universes and there are like mythical lands and things like that that kind of speak into culturally different kind of pantheons of gods and belief systems and things like that. And it's some of the things I love about the comic books is that it allows writers to explore everything, like things that are kind of in existence, right the way to things that are based off existence to some of the most fantastical things in the world. And it it's often a shame, isn't it? Because I think the temptation often is to kind of go, but everything happens in New York, you
Yeah,
know. And as much as I talk about how much I love the comics, don't get me wrong, there are probably 85 billion comics written based in New York compared to how many that there are. But yeah, I thought it was great how they explore the wider world. Even, you know, like
yeah,
we've seen stuff in space, but this was nice to see that actually there are different parts of this planet.
yeah. So the American bits was San Francisco, which is quite
Yeah,
nice to see a different part of the states at least
yeah.
for one bit. But with the Hong Kong and the China stuff, and it it reminded me in that sort of like with the location stuff of like the Bond films of like the 70s and 80s where you'd get these exotic locations to
Well,
us.
and like almost similar, like Indiana Jones,
Yeah,
like it kind of had that. And we the people in the movie and we as the audience are going to explore bits of the world that we're probably much more aware of exist than when we were watching them in Bond movies or indie movies. But let's explore it together. And yeah, I totally get where you're going with that.
so yeah, that is my number five.
I loved it as well, by the way. Spoilers, it doesn't make my top five. If I'd have had a top 10, it would have been in my top 10. And I can tell you right now, it'd have been number seven. Like that's where it would have come from me. I share your love for this movie. And yeah, just a shame that there are six things that I like more than it. But yeah,
Yes.
I think it's a fantastic movie.
So what is your number four?
So my number four follows very, I think, snugly along from one. The reason why your number five is your number five. My number four is Black Panther. Black Panther does everything that I think you just described Shang Chi doing. However, I think Black Panther's. I prefer Black Panther of the two. And I couldn't necessarily 100% tell you why. I think sometimes it just has that kind of little clicky X factor because I think
Mm,
there's so many similarities in conceptually. Yeah, again, exploring that world. You know, you go into the world of Wakanda, and you know you get some great looks at everything from what would be the more tribal element of some African cultures, but right the way up to the propagation of vibranium to make this super almost the greatest city in the world, but the greatest city in the world that no one knows about.
yeah.
It has kind of vibes of. Do you remember like the old cartoon show, The Mysterious Cities of Gold and things like that? That kind
Yes.
of quest for this amazing place and actually going, and this amazing place is here. And of course, one of the plot lines is around like Wakanda being separatist from the world, and to a large part for a very altruistic goal of kind of going, we can't really trust the world. There's a lot of bad people in the world. We can't really trust the world with this. So the kind of the safest ways for us to keep it here.
Yeah.
Um, and then you get to explore that world with them. You know, you are from a comic book side, of course. You know, you've read about it before, but as a movie, you explore this new world with the characters. Uh, I think all of the acting in this is amazing. We'd seen Black Panther before, hadn't we? He had appeared. Is it Civil War?
Yeah.
Yeah. But we'd only kind of seen him slightly in it, and this expands out in that world. Killmonger. I absolutely love him as a villain. I love his motivation. I understand his motivation. I am almost at certain points cheering for him, even though I know I shouldn't, because his story is sympathetic enough for me to go, yeah, you were treated bad, and you shouldn't have been treated bad. So go and get the bastards. And then I'll go, oh God, but the bastards are those people that I really like.
Yeah.
And they're really good. And actually, it wasn't them that did it, it was their fathers and their uncles and things like that. So, you know, a real kind of compelling story behind the villain. And I say that, I mean, you got Claw in there as a villain. I thought he's played really well. It also leans into the Christopher Priest run of Black Panther, which I really like. You got like Martin Freeman playing like the CIA agent and Everett Ross. And these are just characters that I have some affinity with from the comics and just portrayed so well on the screen. And yeah, as I say, probably the overriding thing for me is that I said with Doctor Strange, where I think Marvel does so well is that mixing genres.
Mm.
This is the other side of the coin where I think Marvel does so well is when it shows us parts of the world or parts of the universe that we don't know about rather than things that are overly familiar with us.
Yeah. So my number
Banging
four.
soundtrack as well, by the way. Banging soundtrack.
Talking of soundtracks, my number four, Guardians 1. This is just awesome. Introduction to
Is it an awesome mixtape? Volume
it
one.
is an it is an
Yeah.
awesome mixtape, volume 1. A great way to introduce the world to the Guardians. As I said, I know that they really weren't ones that the masses would have known about.
A huge surprise that they were getting a movie, let alone that they got a movie that did well. Yeah.
Yeah. And then when I saw the cast and I saw that Dave was in it as Drax and Chris Pratt from Parks and Rec, who I was just like, he's not funny. What are they doing with him? And it was one of those where you, just like everything going into it was this is not gonna work. They've just
It
done Avengers.
it felt like the end of superheroes, didn't it? Like
Yeah,
they'd had such short at this point, but an amazing run where you just every time I went and saw one, I went, well, this is the one that's going to fail. This is the one that's going to fail. And then, kind of, as you say, with the casting and all that jazz and the characters that are using, as much as they were characters I loved, I was like, yeah, this is where they're going to fail. This is the one where they've hit the blooper and they'll lose a load of money and we'll never see one again.
and yeah, they smash it out of the park. We mentioned it on the reacts for the Bowie video that sometimes when you pick a song for a film, it just works.
Yeah.
And they managed to do that with songs from the 70s that didn't take away from what was going on, just enhanced it.
And integrated as well, didn't it? I mean, I
Yeah.
think that's one of the super smart things about it. And I say super smart things. One of the super smart and endearing things about it is not only did it have a great soundtrack, but that great soundtrack, when those songs played, sometimes it was just for background songs, but they fit the scene. But even sometimes they were integrating the scenes, ultimately, right the way up to the point of it being a really amazing and heartfelt plot point.
Yeah. And yeah, I absolutely love this. And I put the first one over the second one only because I went in not expecting anything and got amazing. And then the second one, we already knew what was there, and they just carried on with how good it was. So obviously, when 3 comes out, I'm hoping it's more of the same.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, like depending on when we we release this stroke, watch it. 3 is right on the horizon, isn't it? And um, I I think you said about how. Oh, I said earlier about not going to the cinema. That's a movie I'm going to the cinema to watch. Thank you very much. I feel like with Volume One and Volume Two, it would be rude not to go and see Volume Three, and not just because I'm now a sucker and indoctrinated. This isn't like when you're watching the 17th season of a TV show you stop liking after season 2, but you feel you can't stop watching anymore. I want to see number 3. And God, fingers crossed. Let's hope it's good.
Yeah. So, what is your number three?
Say, speaking of number 3s, yeah, my number 3 is Thor Ragnarok. This movie absolutely knocked my socks off when I saw it. I wasn't expecting what I got. I love Taika Waititi. Bit like we said with Guardians, that there are certain points though where you kind of go, really? It's on a Thor movie, but this was something that probably on paper shouldn't have worked, but just worked so well for me. It touches on a bit that I loved about the movie is the fighting in the arena and the
Yeah.
Hulk in there. There was a little bit of reticence for me around that because effectively that's like Planet Hulk as a storyline. And when I watched that, I went, "Ah, oh, okay, we're not getting Planet Hulk as a movie," which is a bit of a shame because I love the run of Planet Hulk. But to integrate a Hulk story into the middle of this Thor story, and I think quite often the wider story around it, so like Hela being introduced into it, and basically becoming straight away like the top dog in the family.
Yeah.
No pissing about. She's like, I'm the big sister. I've been hidden away because really I'm a badass and I can whoop all you, and shows it. I think sets up a really credible threat in a movie that does have a lot of humor, and I think that's where this is one of those Taika Waititi movies. Or I'm going to say one of those. Like nearly every Taika Waititi movie, he manages to fill it full of humor, but not at the detriment of the severity of the story. So the humor feels like breakpoints, and that humor makes when the bad things happen hurt even more because you've had those light moments with it. It introduces us to probably a more comedy Thor than we'd seen, and I think there was comedy elements to Thor certainly in the Avengers, but a more comedy Thor than we've seen, but probably a more human version of the god, and probably necessary for what they do with him. We talked about Avengers Endgame. I think this builds him to that character that we ultimately get in those movies, and makes his even further outside this movie arc that much more interesting. And it looks gorgeous, and again, banging soundtrack. But yeah, absolutely love Thor Ragnarok.
Maybe more on that later.
Okay, Roger, Roger. Your number 3.
Infinity War.
Infinity War games. Yep.
War. Um, as I said earlier when we were speaking about Endgame, this is the perfect way to get set for the big end, the mass battle. Um, all the way through, you're seeing the rise to god tier of Thanos. You're watching Thanos fuck people up. How he takes out Loki. You see Thor, as you said, from Ragnarok coming out of that being broken because
Yeah.
of what he does to Loki. You get also, like you said, with Black Panther, with Killmonger, Thanos coming across with the reason why he's doing what he's doing and why he is justified.
There's a reason why there's lots of Thanos was right t-shirts that exist, and that's because
Yeah,
it's um, such a smart motive for what he's doing. Whether you agree with it or not, I think everyone can kind of go, "Oh yeah, yeah, I get the idea here."
yeah, and all the all the action scenes work in this. They don't outstay the welcome. They're not to a detriment to the story because they're taking the story along, but everything gets you at that point for when the snap happens, it kicks you.
It continually, even pre-snap, you sort of said about like kind of that intro with of Thanos coming in and taking out Loki. You know, you get the but we've got a Hulk moment and things like that. But none of that ever feels cheap for me in the movie. It never feels
Yeah,
like it's just like for him being the big bad, he feels legitimately a big bad, and I think as the movie goes on, I think it does in what is a very colourful superhero action movie. I think it builds that dread really well. You start every fibre of your being goes, I've seen action movies before, and bearing in mind we did know there was a second movie coming after this, but we've all been there before, and you kind of go, the heroes will find a way, the heroes will find a way. And I think as that movie builds and builds and builds, you become more and more aware of going, I don't think they've got a way, and
yeah,
bad things are going to happen here. Like we are going to lose some of these people that we have grown to love over these many movies. Like there's not going to be a good ending for everyone here. And as you say, you get to the snap, and there's a small part of me that massively wishes I'd never read Infinity Gauntlet, because I really wonder how that snap moment would have hit me if I didn't know it was coming.
see, this thing, I haven't read Infinity Gauntlet, so I didn't know
Yeah,
what would happen when he did the snap, and I was sat there just like eyes wide, mouth gape, going,
yeah,
but no,
yeah,
no, oh shit,
yeah. And like, and that's not to say that having read it spoils that, because really the honest truth of it is knowing what was coming, there was always that part of me, even when I was watching that movie, going, will they do that, or will it be a lessened version, or what will they do? And I think they delivered it fantastically well, like really great. And so but yeah, I don't know. I kind of do wish, what if I'd not known? And I know I'll never know, but yeah, it didn't hurt it too badly. It was only kind of it puts that slight grain of curiosity to go, wow, this must have freaked so many fucking people out when this happened.
yeah. And the thing is, even obviously, I hadn't read Infinity War, but I understand read comics is obviously that's why we do this. Unlike obviously a lot of people that would have just gone to see the film because it's a superhero film and that's what they do. That's what superheroes are. They're just
Yeah,
these films. I was like, "Ooh, this could be an interesting thing." Are we getting because you sort of knew that there was going to be something to bring some of these back because they weren't gonna wipe everyone out the way that they did. But there's a hint of you that goes, but are they?
well, I mean, the next movie, well, say the next Avengers movie is called Endgame, and we knew it was the end of these phases. And don't get me wrong, they're making so much money at this part that you just assume the Hollywood machine is going to continue on in some way, shape, or form. But you are right; it did put that kernel of going, I might not get a happy ending here, or I might not get the ultimate happy ending.
Yeah,
This actually could be. And one of the things that I think was super smart in what they did is, so when the snap happens and half the population of the universe disappears, um, and I think one of the things that threw a nice seed of doubt in is that it wasn't like they went and will keep all of the most popular characters.
yeah,
Some of those popular characters went, and you went, well, hang on a minute, what? You've got another movie to do, and you're telling me, at least for a large part of that movie, because you're not going to resolve this in scene one, I'm not going to see some of those. And yeah, I thought it was a great way of doing it.
yeah. And it was very much the in. Oh, I was trying to think what the fact anyone was fair game at that point.
Yeah,
Say
yeah, yeah,
you lost a couple of the Guardians, but you wouldn't know which ones.
yeah,
You lost sort of half partners, and certain people then stayed, and as I
Yeah,
said, even like the original five of the original Avengers, they weren't safe. No
no,
one was safe.
Spidey. You
Yeah.
know, like that was the big one for me. I'm kind of going, oh, you took Spidey out. That's a gamble. Like, and it probably wasn't a gamble at that point, as we say. It was an absolute juggernaut at this point. But to then go into the next movie and not have like the Everyman
Yeah.
as a character that you're going to use throughout, yeah, a very bold, and I think a bold decision that paid off and paid off really well.
So what is your number
Oh,
two?
before we go on to
Oh,
number two, I am going to do a spoiler. Infinity War doesn't make my list. However, as soon as we finish recording, after talking about it, I'm going to watch Infinity War. Because talking about it again has made me want to watch it this evening. And again, would have made a top 10 for me. Really would have made a top 10 for me. But yeah, just didn't quite get there for me. Um, number two, you say?
yes.
My number two has already featured on the show. I'm just gonna do my number three again. No, it was your number four, Guardians of the Galaxy.
Yes.
So we touched on kind of the surprise for me with the Guardians. So comes off a run I really like. Comes off the story Annihilation. I grew up with a different Guardians of the Galaxy. I grew up with the old school Guardians that are featured in some of the movies, or some of the characters are. But when Marvel, during and after the Annihilation event, started to talk about they were going to launch a Guardians of the Galaxy with effectively a load of characters who were, I would say, pre that, not even like C list. They were, some of them were close to Z list. You know, like
Yeah.
Rocket had not really done much. Groot was like a random villain that had been used a few times in very old stories. Star Lord had features in series before, but kind of was a nothing character in the universe. Probably the character that was most well known was Drax, because Drax had featured in a lot of the Thanos stories that had been perpetuated Marvel over the years in the Jim Starlin years. This was a slightly redesigned Drax in visual, not massively, but just slightly. And yeah, I really grew to love this comic book. And then, as I say, they said they were going to make a movie, and I'm like, oh god, this won't play for the wider audience. And I would say that there's significant, James Gunn makes significant differences that I think make this a much more palatable for a movie audience. Things like the soundtrack, things like the humor. So the humor is much more. I almost said forced. Then forced would be the wrong word. It is much. It is in many more scenes than it would have been initially in the comics, and I think the comics
Yeah.
over time has started to ape what the movie characters do. But that humor was there, I think, to very very quickly get us into the world of this being a very awkward, very weird, very quirky family, a family that shouldn't exist, a family that and I say family or group of friends, whichever terminology you want to use, but these characters should not hang out together.
Yeah.
They wouldn't meet. They're totally disparate. But when you put them all together, they click. And sometimes that's clicking in like the sarcasm of Rocket to all of them, the the sort of dumbfounded naivety of Drax and his impossibility to understand sarcasm or tone or anything like that. And you wrap them all together, and I think what you get is this beautiful parcel of a group of people that you probably shouldn't want to hang around with, but you can think of nothing better than to be on that ship and hanging around with these guys, because you know you'll just have the most amazing adventures and the most amazing time, whilst it looking really good and having a great story. Yeah, I think this is, it gets my number two, partially as I say because of the surprise of the fact that it did work so well, but not only because of surprise and not only because of its quality, but it it has a heart, and I think it has a heart that a lot of movies don't, and certainly I think a lot of blockbusters don't. You know, they'll try and have a heart. You'll have
Yeah.
that moment where I don't know, there'll be some really kind of manufactured love story or sacrifice that someone wants to make, and you just don't buy into it because it's not been written well enough, or the actors aren't good enough, whatever it may be. But in this, it has such kind of pathos, and you care so much about these characters. And let's be honest, it has a dance off,
Yes.
you know, like, and it has a dance off that I credibly took seriously. I understand why he does that, and it didn't feel cheap or anything like that. Like, it's what he would have done. It is
Yeah.
totally authentic to the character they laid out, and it's totally authentic to the situation. But yeah, gets me in the feels every time. It's probably the of all of the Marvel Cinematic Universes, it's the one that I think conveys genuine emotion, or hits my genuine emotion the most.
Yeah. The moment of Groot shielding them all.
Yeah, yeah,
If that doesn't hit you in the feels,
yeah. Yeah, and again, it's like, it doesn't feel like a just, oh, here's a sacrifice for the sake of the movie. You actually do kind of go, oh my god, he's gonna do it.
yeah,
Don't do it, but do it because I want these people to be saved. Yeah, um, uh, yeah, a masterpiece of let's say kind of summer blockbuster style movie making. Summer blockbuster style movie making often has a very much a formulaic approach, and I think that formulaic approach often prevents me from loving them. Often I think they're good, but it lacks something, and I think often it lacks that character, that emotion, that heart, and this does all of that for me.
yeah. My number two is Spy Tales, Captain America: Winter Soldier. Um, Again, we've said it on a few of them. We love it when we get our Marvel characters in a very different film. This is a little bit Mission Impossible with the espionage bits, a little bit Bond with the espionage, and just a spy movie that I didn't expect to have as a Marvel blockbuster. If this would have been, if you'd have come to me and said, "Oh, we're going to have a Captain America TV show where he's a spy and you know Bucky's going to be there as a spy as well, and it's going to be spy versus spy sort of thing,"
Yeah,
I'd go, "That's a TV series I'll watch because you're going to tell that over 24 episodes and things like that." I wouldn't have said that's going to be one of the MCU films, but they do it so well, and there's little hints in this that then lead on to bigger stories later on as well, which even in here, like the blowing up of Lagos seems like a little thing in it. I say a little
yeah,
thing, but it's a plot point for a
yeah,
scene, but it does then get pulled back later on when we get into Civil War. There are such important things that come out of this film, but not to its detriment that it's you can't have it as a standalone thing and just enjoy it for what it is.
yeah,
And just bringing in Bucky the way that they do in this, from how he is in the first Captain America film, just being, Steve's mate, to them being the badass that he is here. And it, it again, like we've said with Guardians, you write down on paper what this is, it shouldn't work, but it does, and it does so well.
yeah, yeah. I'm with you. Totally with you on this one. But maybe more on that in a minute.
So, Mr. Seddon, what's your number one?
So before I do my number one, this is the bit where I'm going to scan back to what my honourable mention would have been, and my honourable mention would have been Captain America: Civil War. And with Captain America: Civil War, that's actually one that my love has grown for it more and more every time I watch it. I like the Civil War story in the comics, and I think the more I've watched it, the more I have enjoyed the movie portrayal of it. I think at first I might have got a little bit more caught up on the whiz bang. Here they all are. It was the first time that kind of you saw, well, first time you saw sort of Spidey in it and things like that. But maybe a bit more in the direct conflict stuff. But the more I watch it, the more depth I see in it, and the more interesting I find it. And I only use that here because my number one is Captain America: Winter Soldier. I think that so I'm going to compare it to The Dark Knight for a second. I love The Dark Knight. I think it's a fantastic movie. And I think there's a really key thing there, and this is the same thing I'll say about Captain America Winter Soldier, is I think it's a fantastic movie. I don't feel the need to precurse that with I think it's a fantastic superhero movie. And I think that's where the strength of Captain America Winter Soldier and The Dark Knight are as genre pieces of fiction, is that they break the genre. And when I say they break the genre, they don't break it like to never be prepared in a bad way. I think that you could, and you said it there, I think you could just watch this as a standalone movie. Yes, it helps knowing who Captain America is. Yes, it helps knowing who Bucky is. Yes, it helps knowing who the Black Widow is. All of those tropes that come with the superhero universe it's in assist it. But actually, if you took all them away, what you have at its core is a fantastic espionage spy movie. And I would say one that if I was doing like a watch through of spy espionage movies from right the way back to the beginnings of cinema to now, I would sit that snugly in a playlist of, if I was going to pick the best spy movies out there, it would sit in there. It has so many nods, especially for me, to a lot of the mid to late 70s ones. And, you know, like my dad was a massive spy movie fan. And so there would always be a lot of them playing in the house. And when I watch Captain America Winter Soldier, it feels like I'm watching one of them, but it's got these superheroes I really care about in them as well, which gives it that extra bump. I think it also, I think what the Russo brothers do very smartly here is put, they smush the two genres together fantastically, but they don't even limit themselves to that. You know, there's kind of inspirational scenes from movies like Heat and things like that. They nicely borrow, like not the wretchedly still to try and give ourselves a bump. I think they nicely borrow from so many familiar concepts, familiar themes, even familiar scenes. You said about Bucky, you know, like Bucky could have arguably gone a bit of a throwaway character in the first Cap movie, and also with Sebastian Stan who plays him. Like we'd all of these actors are massive names now, aren't they?
Yeah.
And they were probably a bit less massive then, but you know, Tony Stark was Robert Downey Jr. Chris Evans was Captain America. Now, as I say, he's not the Chris Evans that he is now, but he'd been in a Fantastic Four movie. He was known. Sebastian Stan, like, no, he wasn't. So when they had him as Bucky in that first movie, I kind of went, well, we're never going to get the Winter Soldier story then, are we? Because they've got a bigger actor in for that.
Yeah.
And lo and behold, we get to this and we do get the Winter Soldier story. They use him. I think he plays the role fantastically. And like so many on this list, the Ed Brubaker run of Captain America, where the Winter Soldier story happens, it is right near the top, if not the top Captain America story I've ever read as well. And they do it fantastic justice with this movie. And as you say, they link it into the wider universe. There are plot points that they set up in here that pay out all the way to Endgame and beyond. You know, like we are still seeing that even in this next phase. A masterpiece of. If someone said to me, I don't like superhero movies, this is the one I put in front of them and go, watch this, see what you think.
So
And that's my number one. Sorry.
that is your number one is Captain America: Winter Soldier. My number one comes from Mr. Tiger Waititi and is Thor.
Love and Thunder.
No.
Okay.
Ragnarok.
Oh yeah, yeah. I've heard of it.
This I love. As you said earlier, Tiger Waititi is amazing. I can only think of one bad film that he's done, and it was the aforementioned Love and Thunder.
Same here. Same here. And it is a shame. Sorry, I'll let you go. I just want to cut in on this bit purely to kind of go. I think that was one of the things that made Love and Thunder so bitterly disappointing, isn't it? Is that we'd already seen that, like, all of these actors in this creative team do such a wonderful thing, and so you kind of assume everything's going to be. And yeah, unfortunately, Love and Thunder didn't kind of get even remotely close to the standards of this, did it?
No, so as you've said earlier, the perfect humor, that part where you've got Thor looking across once he's in the Colosseum, sees it, it's whole, we're
Yeah,
friends.
I know him from work.
um, Goldblum is genius in this. He somehow manages to overact yet underact at the same time in the same scene. It's great. Hela as the big bad,
Yeah,
because she is the embodiment of hell, should be as powerful as she is, and it works so well.
yeah. Kate Blanchett, like, great actress.
Yeah,
Like, don't like, but just this kind of extra level of sinister gravitas that I kind of not seen in her before. Like, I hadn't. We said earlier about casting. Like, when she was cast as this, I kind of went, oh, okay, well, let's see how this goes. Because I don't know. I guess in my mind, she would be more the heroine rather than the villain. But
yeah,
yeah, amazing. I thought.
and most importantly, the introduction of Korg.
Thanks for saying that, because I must admit, when I got to the end of my Thor Ragnarok bit and we'd already moved on, what was ticking over in the back of my head was, how didn't I mention Korg?
And his telling us of how we all need to start a union.
He
Gotta
says,
love.
I don't know if you've ever seen it, but like, I watched an interview with Taika Waititi, and they kind of said, like, how did you come up with the character? And he was just like, oh, like, he, I just based it off of my experience of bouncers in New Zealand, because he said, there'd be these great, massive guys that you knew could kill you, but actually, when you started talking to them, they'd just be like these kind of really sort of friendly, maybe not the brightest people ever. And he just said, yeah, he just kind of channeled that, and I just went, that's probably how you make amazing, memorable characters, isn't it? Is you base them in a reality and then put them in a fantastical setting.
Yeah, it it just does everything that I like well. It the humor is perfect. The action scenes are great. I it's Hemsworth turning Thor into the comedy figure that he can be in the comics,
Yeah.
because there are runs where he basically is just a meathead.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, quite often he's been portrayed as a buffoon, hasn't he?
Yeah,
Like, kind of, and with degrees of, even if you were going to take a step back from buffoon, because he is a god, that arrogance that may come with a god. He's much more powerful than everyone else, so it must be hard not to see everyone else as ants or lesser beings. And yeah, okay, he's a hero and he helps us, but is he helping us because um, he wants to, or is it like the
this is my
same as like,
duty.
or the same as like if we helped a pet,
Yeah,
but yeah, yeah, I think kind of, I think it is quite easy, isn't it? And I think sometimes, and possibly because of Love and Thunder, I think it is possible to almost attack this under the guise of going, well, you just made him into like this sort of buffoon idiot character. But I think that actually misses the layers that come with that. You know, like he's
He,
not just that, but that is an element of him.
yeah, he. This thing in this, he's a bro buffoon. You know, he's think like Jersey Shore or those sort of types of where it's like,
Yeah.
yeah, of course, I've got to go to the gym. Yeah, I'll do that because like it basic stuff that they understand. Whereas when they got to Love and Thunder, they amped it up too much. Where you had like the stupid thing where he's dropped his kegs and is standing in the middle of the thing, thinking that he's invisible because he's not got any clothes on and gone
Now,
full Emperor's New Groove.
and you know, like we said earlier, um, adding this element to him allowed for the Avengers, Infinity War, and Endgame stories to look at him in an interesting way as well. Like, I think if it had just been, I am Thor, I am all powerful Thor, I think he's a lot less interesting when it comes to that. You know, you said
Yeah,
it spot on. There's a broken Thor. Like at the start of Infinity War, there's a broken Thor, and in this movie, so to lean into that kind of bro Thor humor sort of thing, like let's look back at how this started. He gets emasculated by his sister,
yeah,
and if you have traditionally been someone who probably had nothing to worry about in a fight, and you do a lot of fighting because you're a hero, um, how would someone who's had life so easy probably react when suddenly that ease is taken away from them? I think they might go to this extreme. Like they might suddenly, the broness of them is hyped up to 12 because they want to almost outwardly show the world, no, I'm still a man, I'm still a bro, I'm all this
yeah.
sort of thing. So I think it actually makes very good character and storyline sense as well, rather than it just being for larks.
And as you said, we said with Winter Soldier, obviously, what comes out of this when he is broken fat for drinking in Endgame and Infinity War, that four is built here
Yeah, yeah.
because
Arguably, I think that Thor should have ended in Endgame. And again, not to pile on to Love and Thunder, but I think that's one of the things that makes Love and Thunder weak because I felt like we get a different Thor when we watch this movie because of the trials and tribulations he goes through to this, and I feel like the Infinity War and the Endgame should have fundamentally. I'm going to use the term fixed him to a degree, but instead we kind of got this Thor from this movie times 100, didn't we?
yeah.
Yeah.
So you lot out there, what are your top fives?
That's
Let
quite
us know.
nice. We had a lot
Don't know.
of interchangeability there, didn't we?
Yes.
I think a lot of them resonate, and I just wanted to pick up on my lack of Avengers movies in there. I do really like the Avengers movies. I think Infinity War and Endgame especially. I do have a whole lot of love for Age of Ultron as well. I think I have more love for that than a lot of people do. Um, they probably would have been in and around my top 10. And I think the only reason why they don't is other than Guardians, but Guardians shares some DNA. Most of the movies that I think I end up liking most in the MCU are the ones about a singular hero, but with a wider cast. You know, talked about Doctor Strange. It's Doctor Strange. It's Wanda. But I like. I think I resonate more with the Marvel movies that are here is the character you are coming to see. We're going to tell a story about him. And I think sometimes when we get to the Avengers movies, it's not that there's too many. I just think that you're probably able to delve into their characters a bit less because you've got to delve into 7 to 8 characters rather than
Yeah.
2 or 3. But amazing movies, all the Avengers ones. I absolutely love them.
So as we said down there, let us know what you lot have as your top fives.
Give us your top 5
That
and
YouTube thing of liking, subscribing, ringing bells.
and
That'd
tell
be
us
nice
why
too.
Captain America: Winter Soldier is the best movie in the MCU.
No, it's not. It's Ragnarok. Just had
What?
that conversation.
What? What? Oh, your mic cut out there. Sorry.
Yeah.
And then if it didn't, It is in editing, I can tell you that.
So, next time will
Next
probably be that
time.
time of the month of
Oh yeah, yeah.
solicits.
Hopefully we'll have the solicits and a bit of news to catch you guys up on. And probably not too distant after that. I guess we'll probably be back to Sandman again. I'd have thought.
Ooh, yes.
It feels like we're due another volume.
Yes,
Yeah,
especially now that Batman Nightfall
Batman.
is all
Yeah,
done.
yeah.
We should get back into
The
Death
beautiful world of Dream and
and
Death. Yeah,
Dream and the rest of the gang.
yeah.
So, as always, thank you for watching. Do the YouTube things, and we'll be back very soon with more comic books. And whilst you're here, watch some reacts.
Oh yeah. Put up a really good one today. Not today, because by the time you watch this, it will be significantly past. Europe is Lost by Kai Tempest. Watch that one. Fantastic. Great song. And you get to hear me and Chris rant on about the NHS in a good way.
And in the words of Korg, socialism. And until next time, goodbye.